Welcome to the Key Culture podcast. I am Niilo Tarnanen and I'm co-hosting this show with Matei Georgiou. Hello, Matei.
Hello, everybody.
Today we have as our guest AMR OKBA, a composer originally from Cairo, Egypt, and living now in Vienna, Austria. Hello, AMR OKBA. How are you?
Hello, Niilo. Fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. And it's a great pleasure to have you here on the show.
Thank you. It's so kind
So,
of you.
Thank you. So this will be another episode on a little theme we have had on our second season in the Key Culture podcast that considers the intercontinental nature of classical and contemporary music. And today we are mostly focusing to how is the music life in Egypt and how is it in Europe, and what can we learn it from the experience that Mr. OKBA has to tell us. So first, could you tell us briefly of your personal history and your background as a musician? Where did you grow up? At what age did you start studying music? And how did you end up into composition?
Okay, fine. I must say that my passion for music started when I was 5 years old. And I was very lucky that my father, he was an architect and a painter. So we grew up with European culture. So we used always in weekend, we go to nature and he paints his works and we listen to classical music. So my dream and my passion since I was very little was one day I grow up to be a pianist and a composer. And unfortunately, because I had my childhood, I would not say unfortunately, but I had my childhood in Algeria, and there were no musical life, and it was not easy to find a chance to study music. So after coming back to Egypt, I had the chance to go to institute to study music beside my school. And I started my first piano lesson. I was quite old. I was 15 years old, I must say. And my first piano lessons was 15 August 1987. I remember this date very well because I was very happy.
How long were you in Algeria?
Almost my childhood for 10 years, because my parents were working there in that time. You know, in that time, Egypt supported a lot of Arabic countries to got its independence, and Egypt supported Algeria and a lot of countries of Africa. So my father was one of the people who were sent to Algeria as an architect to plan cities and build cities there. And then I started my musical studies here beside my school. And my dream was one day to be like those European composers who I used to read about them and listen to their music, like Beethoven, Mozart, and so on. And I finished my school. I joined Faculty of Business Administrations for one reason, actually, because for me, as I was a child, it was clear that I love music, but the advice I got it from musicians and from my father, who cared for me a lot, don't make your art or don't depend in your financial life on your art. So you must have another job and make music as you want. So I joined Faculty of Business Administrations actually for one reason, because it was beside University of Music. So I can go every day to the same street and attend lectures in both universities to learn harmony, counterpoint, analysis, piano. And then after I finished my first bachelor in business administrations, I joined the Cairo Conservatoire. And my target was I must get high marks to get a stipend to go to Europe. And I achieved that. And after I finished my studies in music, I went to Italy. It was Rome Prize in composition, which allows me to spend 1.5 years in Italy to make a cultural dialogue between Italy and Egypt. And then I got another scholarship to go to Austria since 2002.
So can I ask, like, so how long did it take you until you got to Italy? Like, what age around were you when you finished the economics and the studies in Cairo?
I finished my economic studies. I was around 21. I finished the Cairo Conservatoire. I was around 27. And in this age, that age, I went to Italy. And then in 2002, I was exactly 30 years old. I went to Austria to study composition in Mozarteum University.
Yes, very nice to hear about this brief description of your personal history. If you are interested to find more about AMR OKBA's life and activities as a composer, you could also check his website. So please check the links in the description of this video. But now we will probably move on to the next question. Maybe you might take it, Mate.
Okay, so can you describe us the Egyptian musical life? What are the most important local traditions everyone in the world should know about of Egypt?
If I speak about musical life in Egypt, I have to mention first other things which are very important and shaped the musical life and shaped the culture in Egypt, which is, first of all, geographical location. So Egypt is between Asia and Cairo. Egypt has Mediterranean Sea and Red Sea. So Egypt was always a center of attention of the big powers in the world. Egypt was occupied by the Arabs, by the Ottoman, by the French, by the British. And during the ancient Egyptian civilization, sometimes the kings were from Libya, sometimes from Sudan. So Egypt, actually, I must say, it's a pot of mixed salad. Even in our culture today, the common language we use, there are some words from Italian, some words from French language, some words from English, some words from Greek language, and some words from ancient Egyptian language. So our culture is really mixed. I can say during 18th century, our Khedive, Ismail, commissioned Verdi to compose Aida opera for the inauguration of Canal Suez. So we have a long, very old traditions of listening to classical music in Egypt. And it is not like in other countries in the Middle East or in Arabic countries or in African countries. Like as I can say, Egypt is maybe the most important country who has really Western classical music field, beside the Arabic music, the traditional Arabic music and the classical Arabic music and the folk Egyptian music. So classical music, we know it in Egypt. We had our Cairo Opera House, the first one, which was established in 1796 by the inauguration of Canal Suez. And we have now another Cairo Opera House. It's inaugurated in 1985, I guess. We have Cairo Symphony Orchestra. We have Cairo Opera Orchestra. We have Alexandria Biblioteca, who has orchestra for classical music, strings orchestra for classical music. So Western classical music is known in Egypt, but I must say it's not for public, it is for the elite of the society. So the normal public used to listen to Arabic music. And here, I would say, unfortunately, the cultural life in Egypt, from my personal point of view, is not going high, it's going lower. The most care is for the pop music and commercial music. If I look at the Cairo Opera House and all the theaters that introduces opera or serious music in Egypt, they mostly introduce the history of music, the heritages of music, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, Brahms, and so on, but they don't perform the living composers of today, either in the field of Western classical music or Arabic music. But the composers of today, where they find their way is to go to market to make commercial music. And of course, in general, people in Egypt now are more interested to listen to commercial music, and there are few people who know that there is something called serious artistic music. Unfortunately, this is the case.
So since you said about opera houses and the orchestras, could you so there's like 2 operas and 2 orchestras in Egypt, or how many there are officially? I found online, I think, 1 opera and 1 symphony orchestra. How many?
We have Cairo Opera House. It has 2 orchestras, the Cairo Symphony Orchestra and the Opera Orchestra. There are 2. The Opera Orchestra is just to perform operas, but the Cairo Symphony Orchestra to perform the repertoire of classical Western music.
So are there any other orchestras in Egypt, or these are the only ones?
Well, we have, of course, Alexandra Biblioteca. We have strings orchestra. Okay, we have at the Cairo Conservatoire Orchestra, but it is for students. We cannot say it's professional orchestra. And now there is a new opera at the New Cairo is being constructed at the moment, and I think it will be inaugurated soon.
It's interesting what you say. It sounds like that there is actually a strong tradition of, at least for the elite, to pay attention to the classical music, but that nowadays in Egypt, it is mostly just the commercial music that is cared for. And the same applies also to the Arabian tradition, not only to the Western tradition. To some extent, this resembles on the situation how it is in, for example, Finland, that most of the attention, let's say, in the media is focused to the commercial music. How would you compare the situation if you compare it to Vienna, Austria, where you are living now? Is the situation any better in Austria?
Yes, of course.
How much we are paying attention to classical and especially the contemporary music?
Yes, of course, there is no comparison, because in Austria, for example, commercial music is everywhere, and I'm not saying it's bad. It's a genre of music, okay, but normally the government should support serious art and serious music in a way that it does exist, that audience or people, they have the chance to listen to this kind of music and try to understand what is that. Because serious music is the mother of music. I mean, pop music is based on harmony and sometimes counterpoint. Who created that? Bach and Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven. And so serious music is number one, is the mother. And commercial music or pop music, if we can say, it's simplification of what we learned from those genius composers. So we should care for this and make it open for everybody. I can see in Austria, there are a lot of festivals, not only for all the music. A lot of each festival, there are contemporary music being performed. The leading composers of today are being performed and they are paid. There are something called commissions. You pay money for the composer. I mean, the musician, he comes to the stage, he plays music, people applaud for him, he got satisfied, he got paid, but the composer, nothing. Even his music is not performed. And if it is performed in Egypt, it's not a commission. Even we don't get for hiring the materials. We must be thankful that our music is being performed. But in Austria or in all Europe, as far as I saw my experience there are support from the government for music of today. There are a lot of festivals in each small city. There are festivals. Each orchestra performing music of contemporary composers today and being paid. Even for you, if you have an organization, or if you are a businessman or whatever, when you support art, that helps your situation when you pay your taxes. But we don't have this in Egypt, unfortunately. So I see that the support from the government for serious art is not enough. And when we speak about contemporary classical music, it's too far to understand. I mean, okay, that's good. Thank God that in Egypt, we know what does mean classical Western music. But our knowledge about classical Western music is until the beginning of 20th century, maximum Stravinsky and Bartok. But more than this, the new aesthetics of sounds, the new directions in compositions, we don't know about them. The musicians, they don't know about them. They don't know how to play. Conductors, they don't know how to conduct that. Except few composers in all of Egypt, which there are 3 or 4 persons living abroad. I am one of them who know that, and we don't find support to perform this in Egypt. Because number one, the government doesn't care for us, doesn't know what we are doing, and we are trying to do as much as we can.
I understand. Mate, you have a follow-up question.
I was thinking that this could go into the question number 5, for example, because maybe you could describe a bit, because you said you studied in Egypt and in Italy and in Austria. So could you describe a bit the differences and how you like experienced them as an Egyptian, both in all these 3 different places? You can talk about the styles or the public engagement or how the state takes care of the arts, however you want.
Well, when I went to Italy, it was the first time to go to Europe when I am old, mature, because when I was a child, as I said, I used to go to Europe a lot with my parents, with my family, but it was the first time to stay 1 year and a half, a long period in Europe at the age of 27. And I learned their composition with Mauro Bortolotti from Santa Cecilia, Accademia di Santa Cecilia. And then after 2 years, I got a stipend to go to Austria. And I thought, oh, I'm going to Europe again. I know Europe. I was in Italy, but I was surprised that Austria is not Italy. It is under the umbrella of Europe, but it is completely different culture. Musically is different, more contemporary and more modern than Italy, I must say. People are different, priorities are different. How they look to me as an Egyptian is also different. But I can say I'm lucky to be in Austria, one of the most important countries developed in music, of course.
In what way were they looking at different as an Egyptian?
Italians, we say they are much more to us as Egyptians, maybe because we are both Mediterranean. So you can find they are warm people, more friendly, more humor, like Egyptians, we make jokes a lot, okay? Austrians, I felt it's different culture, different mentality of people. If I may, I used there when I am in Austria to make jokes all the time, but I found myself sometimes not understood because they are very serious, and sometimes they got me serious. What do you mean? So I will tell you an occasion. For example, I was in supermarket and by the cashier, the woman telling me, hey, 30 euros. So I told her, can I pay once and you pay once, or every time should I pay? It was just a joke. But for her, she was surprised. She thought that I'm serious and I don't want to pay the money. But the same situation happened in Italy, and the cashier was laughing. No, we will pay for you.
Yeah.
So
I have a similar experience moving to Finland, I have to say, because I'm Romanian, I'm from the south. We also make jokes all the time. And I have the experience that here people don't find me very funny.
Yeah.
But I learned how to make the joke so that I still get some people to laugh sometimes.
Yes.
Nilo, maybe you go on.
Well, I don't know. I just thought this is an interesting topic you're going into. So if you would like to go on more about your first experiences when arriving to Vienna, it would be really interesting to hear. I think you were saying something about you feel very lucky of living in Austria, because that's one of the most important countries in the world of classical and contemporary music. But when you first arrived there, did you already feel that it was easy to, apart from the different humor, to become part of the musical society, or was there more steps into it?
Well, I studied in Salzburg, not in Vienna. So when I came to Austria first, I went to Salzburg for 8 years. And at the beginning,
oh yes, sorry, I now mixed up, but yes.
No problem, no problem. At the beginning, I was surprised and I was not happy because of my expectations. I was expecting that I will find people welcoming me in the way I'm expecting. At least I was expecting to see smile, but I didn't see smile in Austria among people. And for us, in my culture, no smile means you are not welcome. But slowly, when I got to understand the culture there, this seriosity, I understood that they are like this. So it is not something against me. So I have to accept it and understand it. And after 8 years in Salzburg, I didn't face any problems. I used to, you understand what I mean? If I go to Italy, I find people greeting me and smiling to me. That's what I'm saying. They are near to us, culture, because we are used to smile to everybody I see. And sometimes I'm misunderstood. Why is this man smiling to me? He doesn't know me. But of course, with time, I got to understand that the culture there.
Yes, I can see it. I think this was really interesting about what you had to tell about that in Egypt, not much attention is paid to modern music or contemporary music. And I would perhaps want to ask more about how this is reflected in the education system. And you were first in the Conservatory of Cairo.
Mm-hmm.
How could you tell a bit more about how was there any analytical or like performance studies on contemporary music, or was it only of the composition lessons that gave you some insights to contemporary music? And how did it change when you came to Italy and then to Salzburg?
Yes, first I say in Egypt we have two main institutes to teach music, or let's say 3. The first one is University of Musical Education, which is under the Offenbach. I forgot the name, I'm sorry. It's educational university. It prepares music teachers. So it's not to prepare professional musicians, but to prepare music teachers. And then we have 2 institutes who prepare professionals, musicians. The Institute of Arabic Music, and there they study professionally Arabic music and few of classical Western music. And then we have the Cairo Conservatoire, which is specialized in Western classical music, and we learn very few things about Arabic music. So I studied at the Cairo Conservatoire, where I was focused on Western classical music. I can say there you can learn until Bartok and Stravinsky, but more than this, there are no informations. So when I got to study at the Conservatoire, I learned about Bartok and Stravinsky, and it was a big step for me, of course. Earlier to that, my experience was Brahms, Mahler, but nothing about 20th century. I got to learn about Schoenberg and dodecaphony system, for example. So it was a step higher for me. But of course, when I went to Austria, it was opened to go more into Western classical contemporary music, of course. Of course, I face this problem when I'm teaching here at the Cairo Conservatoire to my students, because I see that it's not easy to teach my students contemporary thoughts of sounds, because most of the students who came to me by their first year, they want to compose melody and accompaniment, or let's say homophonic texture. And it takes a lot of effort from me to teach them to withdraw the melody from their music, to focus on one tune or two pitches or three and create something has a meaning. It is very difficult to change their mindset about music instead of melody and harmony. Normally they come to me, they want to use what they learned in music theory in their composition. So they want to make chords and harmony and melody, and it's language of maximum 19th century. But I can say there are some students who are really open, and I got a very good result with them.
I was gonna ask, because I would say in a way my experience is, and I guess many people's experience is like this. I started composing when I was 17, something like that, and my teacher, of course, I was playing mostly classical music as a pianist, so for me it was also hard to learn to think outside the box, and I also started writing some chords and melodies, and I remember I did a theme with variations for piano in G minor, and I did some prelude like Rachmaninoff style and stuff like that. And so, but my teacher did push me to write something with messianic modes and some dodecaphonic, and then I had to do some Lutoslavsky style pieces. And I was protesting a lot, like I wasn't very happy about it. So it took some time until I kind of got used to it. So maybe I think the difference is maybe at what age you start that, because if you start it at 22, maybe it's a bit difficult. But if you start when you're young enough, maybe you have time to develop this kind of thinking outside the box. What do you think?
No, I started to write contemporary music when I was 30.
So
when I went to Austria.
So would you say that in Cairo, what kind of pieces would you write there? Like, let's say, stylistic wise and let's say ensemble wise, and did you get them performed there? Was it possible?
Yes, I got them performed. I can say it was major and minor with some dissonance, because it was not out of the major and minor scales, but with some minor seconds to make some dissonance in the sound. That was my understanding in that time.
Right. And would you say the situation has changed now that when you're also teaching there, would you say there are teachers there also who are teaching something else than major and minor with some seconds, or it has stayed mostly like that and you're the one trying to push things in a different direction?
I would say at the Cairo Conservatoire, we are around 7 or 8 professors, but I can say 2 of them who really studied out, me and a friend of mine who studied in USA. So we are doing this, but the majority is not, of course.
So is it so that now you're dealing your time between Cairo and Vienna?
Yes.
If you're teaching in Cairo but you have also some activities in Vienna.
Yes.
How do you say it? Is it 50-50, or how do you share your time?
Well, I'm teaching at Cairo Conservatoire and American University in Cairo here. But let's say, I think each 2 months, I go to Vienna. I'm trying to follow the most important festivals, either in Vienna or in Salzburg or in Donau-Eschingen in Germany or whatever. So just to be up to date and existing in the musical scene.
So, like, could you still tell us a bit if there is a contemporary music scene in Egypt, what it is like, and are there any festivals? Are there any ensembles?
Well, there is a festival organized by an Egyptian clarinetist who is living in Germany called Sharif al-Razaz. It is the ISCM festival, International Contemporary Music Festival, which comes 3-4 days per year, I think in April, perform contemporary music. This is the only chance. Beside that, I perform one composition per year with Cairo Symphony Orchestra. Also, 2 months ago, I made a concert with the Austrian Culture Forum in Cairo for my music, contemporary music, and my students. So it's very few, I must say.
Do you think that because of the small scale of the contemporary music activities, it is less competitive than in, let's say, in Austria, in the sense that if some new, really active and engaged composer or musician comes up, they are very quickly taken into the circus, so that they really can have premieres, they really can perform, or does it differ?
It's different, of course, because here there is no competition at all. Here in Cairo, I can say we are two composers who studied outside and making something, let's say, somehow different. And of course, we are doing something different means it's not understood by the audience, and maybe not understood by the audience, the musicians as well. And no one will put an eye on you to support you or to discover you or to give you more chances. But in Austria is more alive, of course.
I was thinking to ask this question number 8, so I'm going there now. So now a bit more about an idea that a guest from Ghana told us, that he said that in the school that he did in there, like the education is too much based on Western tradition when studying music, and Western history. People in class learn too much about Western history and Bach and Mozart and Haydn and so on, and Debussy, and they learn too little about their own tradition in African music. Would you say this is the same in Egypt, and do you find this a benefit or a problem, or?
Well, of course, in each country, people prefer their home music. That's for sure. This is the music for public. Other things are coming from outside, so it's nice to know about them. So the popularity is for Arabic, of course, for Egyptian music, for music which has Egyptian or Arabic text, because also music in our culture in Egypt, the Arabic culture is more literature, and the only form about the musical form that came from Arabic culture and Quran reciting, okay, how to tune the text you are reading. And from here, music means song, so means Egyptian language or Arabic language. So the popularity is for Arabic music, of course, and few people, as I said, they are the elite who cares or they understand or they like or they find interest in Western classical music. So, and here you find almost no interest at all or no understanding, because really to import new aspects to a country, you cannot do that by your own. You need really support from the country, you need support from the Ministry of Culture, but alone it's very difficult to do it. Don't forget also that Egypt is a country from the third world country, and there are priorities. Priority is number 1, peace, stability, economics, and then arts come at the end, and then foreign arts come more than the end, and then classical contemporary music. It is almost not existing in the plan of developing the country, except some few poor people like me.
Yeah, so like one of our, we had someone from Ghana and we had some people from South Africa, and they both talked about this this problem of economics, like what possibilities are there for, even if classical music and contemporary music come so down on the list of priorities, what are still the possibilities for thriving there? Our guest from Ghana said that the first time he saw a piano was when he went to the conservatory, and without money you cannot make any kind of concerts and any kind of. But is there any kind of improvement in that? Do you see, or is it going back, or how is the situation? Like, how can a classical musician or contemporary musician make things happen with help
Well,
from the
unfortunately,
government?
I see it's going worse. I don't see it going in the better way because I don't see the care. I will give you an example. 3 or 4 months ago, maybe you heard about in Egypt, a very international event happened, was the Parade of the Pharaohs. When they moved the body of 21 or 22 kings from Egyptian museum to the Civilization Museum. Did you hear about this event?
No, I didn't hear about it.
Yes, it was really broadcasted on all television.
Unfortunately not.
It was broadcasted all over the world, all televisions, okay? And this parade of moving the body of, took about 1 hour, and they commissioned an amateur composer who is making soundtracks for movies to compose the music of this event. The result was commercial music. I mean, how does it come? An event, international event like that, all the world is watching, and you are bringing somebody amateur to write commercial music? What does it mean this? Where are the responsibles in this country? Do really they distinguish between commercial music and artistic music, or they have no idea about the difference? You understand what do I mean? This is a question. You are responsible in a country, whatever your position is. You are choosing a person, amateur composer, writing a soundtracks, music, major and minor, to make music for this huge event.
I can say something that I think relates to this. I don't know if it's the best example I can give, but every once in a while in Romania, somebody has an idea to make some monument, and very often some person who is like no one heard of makes that monument, and then you find out he's the cousin of the mayor or something.
Yes,
and then they get some really big commission to do this monument, and everybody hates it, and then they get a lot of money. So forgive me for assuming things, but considering that we're both from more or less the south, I would assume that this is how things go there too.
Yes.
So it's not so much about contemporary versus commercial as much as it's about who's the friends with who.
It's contacts, connections. I will give you another example. As I mentioned at the beginning of our interview, that we have Cairo Opera House, and there is a new opera house being built in the new Cairo now. Okay, and in this event, I read newspapers that they are planning to compose a new opera for this event to be equal to Opera Aida, which Khedive Ismail commissioned Verdi to compose it. And huge propaganda in the media about this. And it's written that we commissioned the international prestigious worldwide Italian composer, blah, 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 to compose the opera. This name, blah, 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 is not existing in Google at all. If you write his name in internet, except twice in Egyptian newspapers that he is going to compose opera Tutankhamun. And then I found this name in Facebook written trumpet player. And then I found a short video in YouTube about opera Tutankhamun. I found it commercial music, even with wrong harmonic process. And the responsibles are not aware that when they publish that in the whole world, they will get insulted They are not aware for this.
Or maybe they don't care.
Maybe both. Some don't care, and some they are not aware.
Or maybe the third possibility is that only thing they care is money, and this is why they want to have something which is commercial enough so that they can have some sponsors or something similar. I don't know.
Yes, yes, yes. I would say there is corruption, and there are people are getting benefit of that. They don't care except about money. But the people who are over them, like president, he doesn't know this. I would not say he doesn't care. I would say he cares.
So those who could think something greater than money just ignore it. They don't have the knowledge or the capacity to say that, hey, let's prioritize something serious in the culture.
Yes.
Mm.
No, I mean, there are some people getting benefit of that, so they don't care. They care only about money. But there are others, they care about the best for Egypt. But they don't know that what is introduced will give a bad impression about culture in Egypt to the world. I mean, of course, when all the world watch an event like that or opera like this, they will laugh about it. You cannot compare it with Opera Aida from Verdi. But the responsible, some of them are not aware to do
this
that.
is very sad.
Yes.
Now, when we are talking about opera, I'm actually interested to ask something about your opera. And you have composed a concert opera called The Book of Going Forth by Day, which is based on the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So could you tell us more about this project, about the opera itself, and also how did you get the opportunity to write an opera, and how did you choose this topic?
No, actually, I'm very interested in music, in Egyptology, because I'm Egyptian. And for me, I always prefer to be out of Egypt, because when I'm living in Europe, Egypt for me is a long history of 1,000 years. But when I'm living in Egypt, Egypt for me is now. So when I am away of Egypt, that gave me more vision and point of view how to introduce Egypt in my music. And I choose in several compositions the Egyptian Book of the Dead, not opera, the Egyptian Book of the Dead only, but there is also another work called A Journey to the Afterlife, also based on a text of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And actually, in 2004-05, I was commissioned by Christina Fischer, the organizer of Musik der Jahrhunderte in Germany, Stuttgart, while the ISCM Festival, International Society for Contemporary Music, was held in Stuttgart by Musik der Jahrhunderte. And I offered her the idea of the opera, which I'm writing at that time, or I was writing at that time, and she liked the idea, and she gave me the chance to compose the music and to perform it by SWR, SWR Radio Stuttgart, Symphony Radio Stuttgart Orchestra. And there is also another composition also based on Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is A Journey to the Afterlife for soprano and orchestra, hoping to get it performed soon.
So that's a recent one.
Yes.
Okay. We hope that it will have its premiere really soon, even despite of the pandemic delaying everything.
Yes.
But could you tell us a bit more of the Book of the Dead? So, because at least I don't know anything about it. So, but I'm curious. What makes it interesting to you, and what makes it a good background for musical setting in these two works of?
Yes, the Book of the Dead it's like a window. You can see from this window how was the life there, how was the culture there, how was the belief there. It's a book, a lot of spells. Normally, when a person dies, then he must have those spells because he would be asked questions from gods. And if he answers well, means he's going to paradise or he's going to the heaven to meet and unify with Ra, the god. And when you read those spells, some of them, for example, or most of them or all of them are based on what we say in German, we say 10 Gebote. 10 Gebote are the 10 commitments, I think. I didn't lie, I didn't kill somebody, I didn't steal something, I was good with people. So when you read those texts of Egyptian Book of the Dead, you will find it really this culture based on humanity, the culture based on respecting the other, loving the other, freedom. It was really high culture. Even in some sentences, the dead person says, I never seen any plant without watering it. Means it was like if you see a plant needing water and you don't water it. See the level of humanity, how it was. I was caring for my neighbors. I was caring for my friends. And as much as you were a good person, so you will go to heaven and you will be unified with Ra forever.
Are these commandments similar to the ones from the Old Testament of Moses?
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, the Old Testament and the Islam and has the 10 commandments, which also existing in ancient Egyptian religions.
I didn't know that at all. So thanks for that.
It is. It is. It is. Welcome. Thank you.
This is interesting. And is it so that these spells have remained central in the Egyptian culture and how you teach morality to new generations during all the cultural periods in the Egyptian history? I'm thinking it has had the ancient period and then the Christians and Arabs and really many layers in it.
And Islam, I
so
guess.
So is it so that these ancient spells have been present in the culture in all of these periods, or have they been banned in some phase? Or
well, those sentences or those spells, they exist in Jewish religion, they exist in Christianity, they exist in Islam, because Islam believes in Jewish religion and Christianity, and they are part of Islam religion. But the point, those spells are still existing, but with a new dress. So in the time of Christianity or Jewish religion in Egypt, they became, they are introduced as Jewish. In the Christianity, they are introduced as Jesus is saying this, not Isis or Horus or whatever. They are introduced under the name of Jesus. Today, they are introduced under the name of Islam, Muhammad, and Quran. But the content is the same, because now we are carrying the religion. 90% of Egyptians are Muslims, so everything is taught through morality or about morality is coming from this picture or from this religion. But we don't say today, Osiris told us to do blah, 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 blah.
Right, I understand.
We say God advised us to do blah, 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 but we don't mention Osiris.
Could you tell us a bit, because we had like a few other guests who were from either Arab, Muslim majority countries. Does religion play a part in music making in some way or not?
Wow, it's a big question.
I mean, nowadays, let's say, does it influence writing contemporary music?
No, first, I would say, first of all, since we are Arabic country, and I said in Egypt 90% are Muslims and 10% are Christians, music exists in the church, in the Orthodox Church. That's for sure. And music plays an important part in Christianity and Coptic Christianity in Egypt. Let's speak about Islam. I would remind you that Quran reciting is music. Adhan, the call for prayer, is music. But there is a meaning, or there is some says that music is forbidden in Islam. Although we are reciting Quran through music, but we dare not say it is music. We say it's Quran reciting, but it is music and it follows Arabic musical maqamat or musical moods. Most of important composers and singers in the classical Arabic music, they were religious men. They were because they learned singing at Al-Azhar University. Al-Azhar University is a place where educate you to be a religious man or sheikh for Islam. And there you have to study music in order to be able to recite Quran. So of course, music or religion plays an important role. But I would say in the field of Arabic music, of course, not Western one. And it plays also an important role. I would say religion has a strong influence on music because all religious events, praying, it needs music. Reciting Quran needs music. And as I mentioned, most important composers of Arabic music, they were religious men, sheikh or shuyukh, plural. So music, religion had a strong influence on music, but on the other hand, in the contrary direction, there is a big belief in Muslim world that music is forbidden. And that handicapped developing music in our culture, because music for us is something to support the text.
But like I was thinking about the Orthodox Church, because I'm a Christian Orthodox, and I know that in Orthodox Church you can only sing with choir, and all the ceremony is also done with singing. There's a specific type of singing that all priests study, and so in a way also music has a very important part in the church, but it forbids much more than it lets in, let's say. So I mean, you couldn't have a concert in an Orthodox church with, I don't know, a string quartet. You just couldn't, because it's forbidden. Only in the Catholic Church it's possible, or the Protestant Church. So, but my big idea was, because I've been thinking about this sometimes, like a lot of classical music, a big important part of the genres and forms that we have in Western classical music, they are derived from exactly, let's say, pieces like motets and mess and requiems and madrigals and so on that are, well, okay, madrigal is more like earthly, but they are derived from the church and from, let's say, a Christian way of thinking. And I was wondering, is there something similar to that happening in other parts of the world where other religions are important? Are there any kind of forms or genres that are formed or shaped by religion? So I think that was kind of my curiosity, but it's a very specific one.
No, I mean, I would say that music was only to support religion in our culture. And as I said, reciting Quran is music. But the society here does not accept this sentence, does not accept to say reciting Quran is music, because they have their own frozen build. Music means belly dancers, prostitutions, alcohol, sin.
So if if a composer came and did, like, I'm just making this up now. So if a composer came and took some parts of the Quran or some other religious text and made some kind of contemporary song cycle, would that be considered bad or good?
No, it's a sin.
It's a sin, okay.
It's a sin, of course.
So if I understood it correctly, the relationship between music and the religion depends largely on the situation. If it's reciting the Quran in the traditional way, it is okay. But then if it's about the popular music or the entertainment, it's considered sin in the religion. And then again, if it's something like Western classical music, it's something that perhaps the religious traditions don't even care about because it's kind of foreign. Is this correct understanding of it?
Somehow, I will tell you. First of all, I must be clear that the religion itself, Islam, does not prohibit music. And the evidence of that Quran reciting is music. But in our culture, we have this frozen picture that music always connected to parties, alcohol, women, prostitution, and music open your souls and bring in your thoughts the ideas to make what is sin.
Yeah. So it's kind of connected to the bad stuff.
Yes. So it's better to cut it and don't use it.
One question I was thinking to ask is, you have works titled such as Isis and Maria, and Between the East and West. Okay, Between the East and West, it's more largely about maybe the relationship between, like, well, there are maybe many layers of East and West around the Mediterranean area. But the one titled Isis and Maria is actually very interesting one because of Isis relating to the ancient Egyptian tradition, and then Maria is one of the central figures in many branches of Christianity. Probably not that important to Protestant Christians as I am, but I don't know. Maybe Mate could tell more about the importance of Maria in Eastern Orthodoxy. But then again, in for example, in the Catholicism, Maria is a very iconic figure.
Yeah.
So what is the piece about, and how does it put this kind of equation between these two?
Yes, actually, I was asked to write music for a concert by AMR Ensemble in Salzburg, and it was in Sylvester, the 24th of December 2007, to perform at the church. So they asked me to compose something spiritual. And I choose this topic, Isis and Maria, because in the ancient Egyptian mythology, Isis is the mother of Horus. So the idea of God and his mother, it does exist in the ancient Egyptian mythology. That's why when Jesus and Maria came to Egypt, they accepted the idea. They thought that this is Isis and Horus, but in a different shape. So this is one of the reasons why Christianity was welcome in Egypt, because this mythology of God and mother, it existed in the ancient Egyptian mythology before. So it was not foreign, it was not something new when Maria came to Egypt. And I found this link is very interesting to mix it in my composition as a link between West and East. Also, I have another composition introduced by Neue Vokalsolistin in Stuttgart called Faith, for 5 voices, for 3 men voices and 2 women voices. And it starts by the god's name in ancient Egyptian religions: Isis, Horus, and the 3 main religions: Jehovah, Jewish religion, Jesus, Christianity, Allah, Islam. Okay, which for me, I wanted to say that all religions, they came from one God, having the same message, but it is different from time to other, from society to other, upon corresponding the people. But the main is one. The main is all coming from the 10 commandments, from one God. And if you listen to this piece, you'll always find that the men, the three men, tenor, baritone, bass, and baritone, they always start to sing together, but with time they got separated and differs to each other and unsynchronized. Then comes the women voice. The woman voice for me in that composition was the heaven, was the 10 commands, coming together, humanity on the earth to be together in one message. They start together, they got separated, each one says, I am right, you are wrong. So the problem here is not in the message which came from one God, but the problem is in humanity, is human being who does not accept the other because he is different to me.
Very nice. So you seem to be quite interested in these, let's say, religious harmonizing ideas expressed through music. Since we are at this, I was actually thinking to ask also about the place of women in music in Egypt, because
Yes,
that's
of
also
what?
that's of women, like
Women, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
because I know that in some countries in the East Muslim world, we had one guest from Iran who talked about this. It's a bit more complicated to be a female and to be a singer, for example. That's not very welcome, but you could maybe teach music or so. What's the situation in Egypt?
No, in Egypt it's much more open. We have women are singers, of course, a lot. This is no problem with that. But as I said, concerning composition of classical Western music, I would say this direction, composing classical Western music, started in Egypt in the 50s, 1950s and 60s. So now around 70 years, all the composers we had in all those 70 years, around 15 composers who are living maybe now are maybe 4 or 5. So those 4 or 5, there are 2 women or 1 woman at the moment, let's say. But of course, I would say my main professor in music theory was Dr. Awatif Abdelkrim. She was the first Egyptian woman went to Europe to study composition, and she studied in Mozarteum University, and she ended her studies in 1975 or 72, something like that, and came back to Egypt to construct the Department of Music Theory in Egypt. That was a woman. And one of her students, Dr. Mona Ghonim, she went to Vienna to study compositions. And then we have Dr. Nahla Matar. She is doctor at University of Musical Education and he studied in America. So those are the 3 women in history of composition do we have. But in general, we are very few. We are very rare.
How about the rest of musicians? I know in Finland at some point there were some exchange students who were from Egypt. We had one girl from was flutist, and no, 2 girls were flutists, and I mean, they said that there is absolutely no problem of getting a job if you play flute and you're a woman or something like. But in some places like Iran, or not even to mention Afghanistan, like very different situation.
No, it's not like that in Egypt. Thank God.
Yeah, because in the West now there is probably you also know there is this very big debate about female composers and female conductors and how there have to be more of them. Is there any debate like that happening in Egypt?
No.
All right.
Mate, if I may follow, I would like to maybe have a follow-up question, a bit more, maybe, let's say, in the terms of the music itself, about a question about the Egyptian traditions and European traditions. So does this appear somehow in your music? I mean, in choice of the pitch material, or in the rhythms, or in terms of other musical aspects?
Well, of course, there are a mixture.
Is there anything that's...
There is a mixture between Western thinking and Arabic or Egyptian thinking, musical thinking, of course. I used to say I drink a cappuccino in an Egyptian cup. So I always prefer, I have my special Egyptian cup for cafe, which is decorated orientally, which I prefer to drink my Western cappuccino. Okay, so in my music, of course, there are some tonalities are near to my heart, which I often use them in my music, and they are coming from Oriental roots, of course. But I introduce them in a contemporary way of thoughts, of course. You can find that in most of my compositions. Go to A Journey to Afterlife, you will hear that. Go to Radubis, you will hear that. Western thinking, but using materials are non-Europeans.
Isn't it always so that we find out more about our countries and our belongingness once we are away from them? Because
yes.
Because I also, when I was in Romania, whenever my teachers were like, "Why don't you use Romanian folklore?" I was like, "Ah, come on, leave me alone!" Like, always Romania this, Romania that. And then when I live in Finland for 14 years, I find myself wanting to also drink my Finnish music through my Romanian cup.
Yeah, that's it.
Could you elaborate a bit more on what kind of influences from, let's say, the Arabic modes or other traditional elements do you use in your music? Do you mean the usage of microtonality, perhaps, or what kind of particularities?
Sometimes rhythm does appear in my music, the Oriental rhythm. Much more I care for is the tonality. We have Arabic maqamats and Arabic tetrachords. Those tetrachords, some of them are near to my heart, which I use them in Western, in my compositions. Normally, of course, as we know, Arabic music is based on melody. So using the Arabic accounts must be through melodies, but in my music it's not like this. Of course, I use sometimes tetrachords in cluster accords, which of course it looks non-Arabic, but in fact if you feel the sound you will find it Arabic or Oriental. Also, the topics of my music, mostly my music always has topics speaking about my culture. Like faith, when I'm speaking about religions, and all religions is one religion. This is my faith. And this is also Islamic point of view. Although Muslims believe that non-Muslims will not go to heaven, Christians and Jewish will not go to heaven, only Muslims. And this is not written in Quran at all. Quran said Jewish and Christians and Muslims, they follow one religion.
You might find it surprising to find out that on many Romanian churches, I don't remember what's that part called, but when you enter in the church, there is some like drawings from some kind of allegories, and there's often like in hell, there's like sinners and Muslims, and in heaven there's all the other people. So I guess a big part of the Christians from several centuries ago were thinking that Muslims go to hell. So some of us have to be wrong, or we're all wrong, or like one side thinks the others go to hell, the other side thinks the others go to hell.
Yeah.
Well, if we want to end this episode in a, let's say, in a positive mood, so how about considering a scenario where kind of everybody goes to heaven and also in sense of contemporary music. So what should actually happen so that contemporary classical music would become more strong in Egypt? Do you have any ideas on this? And if it could happen in Egypt, could it happen even more widely around the Arabic countries? Or maybe the same ideas don't work everywhere?
Well, I would say if you want for contemporary music, you have to care for composers who create this music.
So everything is about the composers. Is this what you say?
First of all, I mean, the Renaissance in Europe, based on what? Based on the word of Pythagoras when he said, the humankind is the start of everything. If you want to make civilization, you must care for the human beings. And of course, the Renaissance based on humanity, because the human being is who is able to change the reality. So if you want to care for music, care for the composer.
I have some conductors, I would tell that also, but let's see how that goes.
Please.
Yeah.
But how about the other musicians? Do you mean that if we care enough of the composers, that would be enough? Or is it so that we should also encourage more of the performers? I don't know, to empower them to perform more of the contemporary music too.
Of course, you must care for musicians also. But I'm telling you, all what is being performed in Egypt is about the repertoire of music, the heritages of music. So who get benefit of that? The audience listen to music, and musicians go to the stage, play music, getting paid. But where are the composers? So when you perform music in general, either it's contemporary or not, musicians get benefits. But I'm telling you, don't care only the repertoire of music, the heritages of music, care for today, the persons who make music, because musicians are playing anyhow. Let them play our music and encourage us, pay us money. I mean, it's all over the world. Any musician, it's not difficult to get a job. But for composers, there is no a job called composer.
Yeah, this reminds me, once I was in Vienna myself, I talked to a conductor who was a teacher at one of the universities there, and his theory was this, that we have to care about contemporary music, not only because we have to care about contemporary music, but because it is in a way the fuel that once it burns out, we can say that that's where the history of music ends.
Mm-hmm.
So the day when composers will stop composing will be the day when we say classical music lives until this point, and from here on there is no life anymore. So everything is just the past.
Yeah.
And that's a thought that's very interesting that I never hear anyone talk about. That in a way you have to keep the flag up if you want the tradition to continue. If you concentrate only on the past, then it's only a past tradition that doesn't live anymore. Now, out of curiosity, like because you said you were also in Algeria, do you know anything about Algeria briefly? Like, do you have any connections there?
No, I don't, because I was just there first 10 years in my life and I never been there anymore. So I have no idea about cultural life there, unfortunately.
All right. But what do you think? Okay, now this is a super broad question. You probably cannot answer it, but what should, Africa as a continent or countries like Egypt, like other African countries do, so that the rest of the Western world knows more about their musical traditions, about their musicians, about their culture?
We know more about you because you are much more developed. And you don't know anything about us because we are not existing. We are not here in the plan. I mean, in the Middle Ages, when the Arabs had their civilization, everybody was keying to learn Arabic language, was proud to learn Arabic language because it was the mother of the world. If we want to exist, we must exist, not through music, through our development. It's
Right.
not a matter of art now.
Yeah, so the art comes as a consequence of development in a more broad term.
Mhm.
Right.
I think this is an interesting thing and has to do something about what you earlier on mentioned, that that the Western classical music is mostly in the interest of the elite in Egypt. And I think in the similar sense, many of us are in Europe, let's say, are just now trying to think of, for example, China or the Chinese culture when they have become more richer and more important in the geopolitics. So I don't know, I'm not maybe answering to anything, but maybe if, for example, Egypt gets much stronger as a country in, let's say, next 50 years, perhaps we in Europe need to start paying much more
Attention.
attention to what is happening in Egypt, just because it's a bigger partner in trade, a bigger political force, and so on. And maybe the same will happen to
Yes,
some
for
other
sure.
countries in Africa too.
I mean, why you care for ancient Egyptian civilization? You come to Egypt to see pyramids and to learn about this because it was something very special, power and incredible civilization. Imagine that Egypt now has the same power of 7,000 years ago. I swear that all the world would try to learn Egyptian to come to live in this country, like we are willing to go to live in the States.
Right, right, right.
Yes, and I think it's somehow interesting how in some sort I could see some kind of thread going on there in in the history of world that, well, of course, maybe not if you consider the whole world, but at least if you consider countries that are quite close to each other, that maybe something from the ancient Egypt was inherited by let's say of the Greeks and of the Persia and so on, and this heritage was then to some extent inherited to the Western Europe, and this heritage then, for example, went to the United States and so on. So of course it changes every time and adds new layers, and maybe something is forgotten, but
Mhm.
but to some extent it well, I may be thinking it this way because I'm from Finland, where maybe nothing really important in the cultural terms has happened in the in the world history. So
Mhm.
in a sense, we are all the time, if we are uh, learning the world history, we are mostly learning the history of somebody else,
Mhm.
and now,
Mhm.
and
Of the most
whose
powerful
history is it actually?
civilizations, usually. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Exactly, yes.
Mhm.
And in that sense, it is interesting for somehow like whose turn it is in every moment to be the most powerful civilization, who is then kind of cared for
Mhm.
even centuries and centuries afterwards, so that
Yeah.
even somebody from the edge of the world will be at least superficially interested in them
Mhm. Mhm.
200 and 2000 years later.
Mhm. This is a curve of civilizations.
Thank you very much, AMR OKBA, to join us in the key culture for this this discussion about the Egypt and the Europe, and perhaps even more largely about the intercontinental nature of the Western classical music. This is part of our podcast's kind of sub theme of the second season, and maybe third or fourth episode where we have some guests from the African continent, and I think you have added really much new aspects to the discussion that we didn't have with the previous guests. So we're very grateful of that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was my pleasure.
It was very good to have you, and yeah, at least every time I have a new guest from another country that we know very little about, I feel like I'm wiser. So I hope whoever listens to our podcast will feel the same.
I hope so. I hope
Yes,
so. I hope.
indeed. And please
Yeah.
go also and check down in the descriptions also the links to AMR OKBA's music. So you will learn even more by really listening to that, and not only our discussion, even if that also was wonderful time for us three at least to spend with. So thank you everybody, and have a nice day from the Key Culture podcast.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.